Hello everyone, in this video we will talk about connecting to GitHub MCP server without Docker in Claude Desktop. So what if Docker is not installed on your system for some reason? Basically, GitHub's hosted MCP server requires OAuth authentication with the GitHub app, which Claude Desktop's custom connectors do not currently support. GitHub's own installation guide recommends using the local stdio server, either Docker or the standalone library for Claude Desktop. So in this video, we will look into how we can use the standalone library of GitHub MCP server to connect to the MCP server using Claude Desktop. So first, we have to go to this URL and install the GitHub MCP server binary from here. So so this is the URL. Here you need to first download the corresponding, based on the operating system, download the respective zip from this list. So for Windows you can install this, for ARM processor, for Linux install either of this, like this. Once you download this file, you need to unzip it. But where do we unzip it? First we create a folder called C Tools GitHub MCP Server. Once we do that, we have to extract the files in this particular directory from that zip folder. So I have extracted the zip which I have downloaded from the GitHub MCP server website to this particular folder. So once I do that, I get the exe of GitHub MCP server along with the license and readme files. So once you do that, what we need to do is we have to configure in Claude. So what I do is I go to File, Settings. Here you have to go to Developer and click on Edit Config. Once you do that, open the Claude Desktop config file. I have already opened it in my notepad. And then if you already have some MCP servers configured, then you have to add this particular code. But if you don't have any MCP servers already configured, then add this particular code. So here what we are saying is, we are configuring this GitHub MCP server, and in order to connect to this GitHub MCP server, we use this command which points to the exe of the MCP server, and it uses the stdio transport. And the environment variables here we have to use is GitHub personal access token. So for some reason I'm not showing the complete access token here. So this is the GitHub personal access token. So I'll show you how we can get the personal access token from the GitHub. So first you have to go to this navigation menu and then go to settings. Once you go to settings, here click on credentials and then click on fine grained personal access tokens. I already have the token configured, but you don't have any token, you can click on generate new token, give the token some name, description is optional, select the expiration as 60 or 90 days based on the requirement, and here repository access based on the requirement, or you can select any of these. For now I have selected public repositories, and then click on generate token. So this will create a new token, and that token would be displayed here. So once the token is generated, you need to copy that token and store it in a safe place so that we can use it later on. So once you do that, once you generate the token and add it to your Claude Desktop config file, what we do is, first, if you have any open instances of GitHub Copilot, close the existing instances, and then you can check. If you go to File and Settings, then go to Developer, you will find that the GitHub MCP Server is been configured. Since I already have this configured, that's why it was already displaying it before. So once we do that, now in the GitHub Copilot, I can ask something like get me all the repositories from my GitHub account. So here it's asking permissions. Do we want to always allow Claude to access GitHub and search for GitHub repositories? I say I just allow once. So it's searching for the repositories. So as you could have seen, it was trying to connect it to our MCP server. So as you can see here, it has listed all the 16 repositories in my GitHub account, which are sorted by most recently updated. Now next thing what I'll do is, if I want to, let's say, check if there are any open pull requests which I want to review, then I can say, do I have any open pull requests to review? Let's see what it does. So I say allow. So here it's trying to connect again to the GitHub MCP server. I say allow once. Claude wants to use search pull request from GitHub. You can either select allow once or always allow. So as you can see, it says no, there are no open pull requests waiting on your review and none that involve you at all right now. So if I go here to my GitHub repo and go to the repositories, I have all these repos which were displayed in Claude Desktop. So yeah, I think let us now see why Claude Desktop uses stdio and a local GitHub MCP server. So if you notice here, it's using stdio because this is basically stdio is used for in-process communication. That means if the client and server are both on the same machine, then stdio is used. So Claude Desktop, Claude talks only MCP protocol. So if it wants to communicate with an MCP server, it talks to it using MCP protocol. So here it's using stdio transport for communication, and it sends JSON messages over std in or std. So when it sends the request, it sends it on stdin, and when it receives the output from the MCP server, it uses std out. So what this GitHub MCP server does, it's first of all, it's a local process. It authenticates with GitHub using the personal access token, and then once it gets connected to the server, it discovers the tools which are exposed by the MCP server, then translates our MCP request to GitHub API calls. So when I say that get all my repositories, it's translating this MCP request into the GitHub API call and then returns the results to Claude. Now if you see here, it is using now this GitHub MCP server, when it is calling the REST API of GitHub, At that point, it's using HTTPS, the REST endpoint, to connect to the GitHub REST API or GraphQL API. So what happens is Claude sends a request over stdio using the MCP protocol. GitHub MCP Server processes the request. MCP Server calls GitHub APIs over HTTPS. MCP Server sends the result back to Claude. Why we are using local plus stdio? Because it's simple and fast. No HTTP server is needed. It's secure, there are no open ports, credentials stay on your own local machine. It's also reliable because it's a direct process communication using stdi and stdout. Works offline except when calling GitHub APIs. Think of it like a translator. Claude speaks MCP, MCP server translates the request, and the GitHub speaks REST. So the MCP server translates the request to the REST API. So it's when it's calling the REST API, it converts the MCP server request into the REST API request and then sends it to GitHub. Thank you.